Greetings my Guzzlers. We're going to make some brownies, but not just ordinary brownies, these are Nutella brownies. Now I've got this from Pies and Tacos, and she does say it's optional. If you don't want to put Nutella in it, you don't have to, but it defeats the object if you want to make Nutella brownies, doesn't it? So Nutella brownies, courtesy of Pies and Tacos. On her site she talks about making about sort of 9 decent sized brownies, and obviously I want a bit more than that, so I've tripled her quantities. Now conveniently, sort of, on her website, because she also shows how to make this on her YouTube channel, but on her website it gives a printed recipe, or a recipe that you can print out, and she has a handy little calculator thing on it. So it gives the quantities for one lot, and then you can click on 2 times and it doubles the quantities to make double the amount, and you can do 3 times, which is what I'm doing. So I did that, printed it out, and I'm looking at them quantities thinking that don't look right. That doesn't look anywhere near enough to make like 3 trays worth. She's talking about making one lot that big. I'm making 3 times out. And then I discovered her calculator only alters the cup quantity. She mainly uses cups, but she quotes afterwards in grams and ounces. And her multiplying thing only changes the cup value. And because I don't use cups, I've had to suddenly go through and work out all the different grams. So just be careful on her website. Now I've already made a little head start. I've got my oven on preheat, and that's what you can hear, at about 175-ish on fan. And then in this big bowl here, I've got some chocolate chips and some butter melting down. I've got, in my case, 339 grams of unsalted butter and 510 grams of chocolate chips. Okay, we are going to add some more chocolate chips to the final batter, as well as adding a filling of Nutella, but also we're going to add some chopped nuts. Now again, they're optional, but we will be adding how much was it, about 200 grams ish of chopped walnuts in my case. She suggests you use peanuts or cashews or pecans. I just had plenty of walnuts, so that's what we're using. What's a brownie? Well, a brownie, or chocolate brownie, or sometimes known as a brownie, is essentially a chocolate-based confection. It's often sort of a little bit glossy on the top. It can be fudgy, it can be cakey. Really depends on quantities that you're putting into it and how you bake it. You can add frostings, you can add chocolate chips, you can add nuts, or anything else you fancy. Okay, or you can just add plain brownies. Now, if you use brown sugar and vanilla rather than chocolate as a flavouring, they're not strictly called brownies anymore, they're known as blondies. And I think we've had this little discussion a little while ago in the past. It was something else I made. Can't remember off the top of my head what it was now. Essentially, the brownies originated in the States in about the 19th century, and then during the first half of the 20th century they became very popular. Now this is almost there, so as usual, melting it over water. Don't put the bowl in the water. Okay. So because of the quantity I'm making, you're going to want 9 whole eggs. You want 300 grams of caster sugar, 150 grams of brown sugar. We're going to have about 5 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 255 grams of plain flour, 6 tablespoons of cocoa powder, 3/4 or just over 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then like I said, I'm going to add some more chocolate chips. I'm using some sort of gold chocolate chips, mainly because I had a big bag of that open. I'm going to add about 400 grams of them, and like I say, about 200 grams of chopped nuts. Oh, and then for this quantity, you're going to want about 680 grams of Nutella. And that's everything that's going in it. I've also prepared my trays, okay? That's an 8x8 or a 9x8 or whatever. I lined it with parchment paper and I've greased that. Actually, I'm trying out release spray for the first time. And I've also got this great big one where I'm obviously going to make a bigger amount. That's the one I've got to do my Ed Kimber tray bakes things. So that's everything we need. Like I say, the oven needs to be on, preheated. And what we're going to do now is add our sugars into that. So there goes our brown sugar. And unfortunately I'm running out of bowls, so I had to split my caster sugar into two. And we're just going to mix all that in. I've got a hand whisk. You could probably do this in a stand mixer, I suppose, if you wanted to. But for now, I'm just going to mix this in with my spatula. So where did the brownies originate from? Well, you know, I've already said they came from the States. Just getting a few lumps there, just getting them out. Various stories about where they came from. One was a Bertha Palmer. Now, she was a bit of a socialite. Her husband owned the Palmer House Hotel. And in 1893, she asked her pastry chef, or a pastry chef, if he could produce a dessert suitable for the ladies that attended the Chicago World's Columbian Exhibition. And she said, what I would like, she didn't talk like that because she was American, a dessert that would be smaller than a piece of cake and easily eaten from a lunchbox. And the result was the Palmer House brownie, made with chocolate, walnuts, oh look, we're using walnuts, and an apricot glaze. So there you go, that was one version of it. Right, so that's them in. Now I'm going to let this cool a little bit, because the next stage is we need to add our eggs. And what I don't want them doing is cooking the eggs too much. So we're just going to let this settle down a bit. It's still a little bit gritty actually, so I think there's still a little bit of sugar to dissolve. Now you're going to want to sieve. We're going to sieve our cocoa powder, salt and flour into there later. But at the moment, we're just waiting on that to all set around. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about brownies. So now at this point, we can add our eggs one at a time. And we're going to whisk them in until they're all incorporated, one at a time. Okay, it is a lot of eggs, but we're making a lot of brownie mix. I'm almost wondering whether I might need an extra tin, to be honest, but we'll wait and see. Actually, just before I whip this in here, Fanny Farmer is credited with the first printed recipe for a brownie in the Boston Cooking School cookbook, where she talks about molasses cakes baked individually in little tin moulds. However, hers didn't have any hers didn't have any chocolate in them, so they weren't really chocolate brownies, were they? So that's all the eggs mixed in. Now we're going to add 5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're just going to whisk all that in. So at this point, we're now going to add some of the other dry ingredients, and we want about 3/4 teaspoon of fine salt, and then we want our plain flour. Oops. And our cocoa powder, and he says getting crap all over the bottom of that. And now we just want to sift all that into there, and then we're going to whisk that all together. I'm trying to do this carefully so I don't end up getting it everywhere except in the bowl. Now all that's left to go in there now is obviously optional chopped nuts and our chocolate chips. So that's all whisked in there, and now I'm going to add them chopped nuts and these chocolate chips. There's a lot of chocolate in this. Talking of which, I'm saying about different recipes. In this case, we're not going to use a whisk on this. We're now just going to use a spatula. This is my biggest bowl, I think. I did wonder when I sort of thought about making 3 times the amount, whether I'd have the room. Oh, before I talk about these recipes, when we do our pans, because we're putting Nutella in the middle, we're going to add some of this batter to the pan, spread a layer. We're then going to spread some Nutella on top, and that could be interesting. And then we pour another layer on top again. So if you were just making the one pan lot, half in Nutella, other half on top, I've just got to be a little bit more careful because obviously I've got to try and divide it up between 2 different size pans. So anyway, while I'm mixing that in, a modern style chocolate brownie, the recipe for that, published recipe for that, is credited in 1904 in the Home Cookery Cookbook. And that was more of a cake-like, sort of mouldish brownie. But by 1907, the brownie had become sort of something that most people recognised it, what it was. It was in Lowney's cookbook by a Maria Willett Howard, and it was an adaptation of the Boston School recipe for a bang-a-bang brownie, but used extra egg, extra chocolate, so it made a sort of richer, fudgier dessert. Right, I think, digging down, I think that's just about there. Now, with Nutella, I've got to about spread this, so I'm a bit worried about how spreadable this is going to be, because obviously that mixture is very soft. She made it look easy. I can somehow see this not quite working. And like I say, what we want to do is spread a layer of this over the base of the pan. I'm just going to wipe that. Okay, and there's my spatula. I might just need to add a little bit more, I think. You can see it is quite chunky. So I don't want to be too generous, because I've got to get another layer in there, plus I've got that other one to do. Okay, so that's that one. Now we're going to move on to a layer in that one. This is quite thick and fudgy, so I'm adding. She sort of like does it in much sort of larger amounts, and sort of then you see her sort of spreading it over the top. But as I suspected, this brownie mixture is just so soft that ain't gonna happen. So what I'm going to try and do instead is just try and put dollops all over. Not necessarily going to go all the way to the edge, because although having said that, when you cut, I was just going to say, because otherwise it's going to ooze out the edges, but having said that, when you cut them into squares it's going to be oozing out, isn't it? So the amount I want is the best part of this jar. Okay, so I'm not bothering to weigh it. So now it's about applying the top layer to cover that Nutella layer, and I'll have to be a bit careful here because I perhaps haven't quite got as much as I thought I had. So I'm just going to put that to one side for a minute while I get the top layer on this one, and then I think I'll spread any remaining one in there, but there ain't going to be an awful lot. So then I'm just going to spread it a bit like I did with that other one with the spatula. Just make sure it is spread over the top, and then it's going to go in the oven where we're going to bake it for about 25 to 30 minutes until it looks done. We want it to be fudgy, we don't want to dry it all out. Right, here they are both turned out. Had a little glitch in the oven. I must have inadvertently knocked it and I whacked it up on high, but probably took about 25 to 30 minutes like she said. So I've turned them out. There's this one in particular, I'll give this one a little bit longer. Still quite warm, so we're going to let that cool a bit more before we slice it up. Now with that pan, she was cutting that small one into about 9 pieces. I think we might make them slightly smaller than that and get a few more out, and obviously we get quite a few out of that one. But until that's just sort of cooled, we don't really want to cut it, because obviously we've got them chocolate chips in there and we've got that Nutella, and that's going to be quite molten. So we're just going to have to resist for a bit longer. Still slightly warm, but I've cut this one up. The other one I'm going to let cool a little bit longer. But let's have a look. Right, so you can see the nuts, a couple of nuts, or it might be chocolate chips, chocolate chip down there. The Nutella isn't quite as visible as it was hers. Like I said to you, when she did it, she was like using a spatula to spread that over the top, and I thought, I can't see that happening. And when I tried it, it just tries to push it down in underneath. So it isn't quite the same sort of layer that she had, but let's give it, and this is probably baked a little bit more than she got hers baked, but let's have a taste. There's definitely Nutella in that bit. I've also got the walnuts. Brownie is a little bit drier than what I was hoping for. I think part of the problem was that's quite a thin layer, and I think I might have slightly overbaked it. Very chocolatey. Very nutty. There was a lot of nuts in it. Being a sort of edge bit, I hadn't put the Nutella all the way to the edge, so let's have a look. If I sort of move it apart, you can see some Nutella in some of that. But very nice. Chocolate brownie, nutty, very chocolatey, and that taste of Nutella as well. Beautiful.